Mixel's solving experience shows not only in his setting expertise, but also his dedicated kindness, and no one I know in this community would be the same without him.
Such variety and always incredible break-ins.
Mixo is not only a great setter, but also a fantastic solver, which also shows in the setting style.
Mixel is able to take a set of constraints or rule sets and find some core fundamental way that they interact with one another and present a puzzle that's engaging, but also makes the solver feel like they've learned something deeper or gained a better understanding of those constraints. And he's able to do that across a wide range of difficulties, so that's accessible to a lot of different solvers.
Hello, hello. Welcome to Myxo, Mixo. Yeah, I did it right this time, and then I questioned myself. No. Yeah, okay, Myxo. Mixo's setter spotlight. Welcome, Myxo. How are you doing?
Hello, yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm a little nervous, but other than that, it's all right.
And Nevario immediately complimenting you on your looks.
Yeah, that's awkward. Yeah, hello everyone.
Yeah, I've heard Mixo's voice before because he talks a lot when he solves on I don't know if you do any solving on CGC for sure, but I've seen you solve on Skunkworks and you've talked before, so I know what your voice sounded like. That bell.
Yeah, but apparently I sound different because
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Better mic, maybe.
Yeah, it's definitely a better mic. Yeah.
All right, we'll just go with this this weird question first because we'll get it out of the way if you don't have an answer for it. If you could only listen to one song on repeat for the rest of your life, what song would that be?
Yeah, that's a hard question. There's a few that come to mind. I guess I'll say Paranoid Android by Radiohead.
Okay, interesting. I would not have guessed that, but
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, what do you do for work?
I'm a student. I study mathematics.
Oh, cool.
Um,
What kind of math? What's your interest?
Just like in general.
Yeah.
Like I don't have like a specialization, but I like geometry and group theory, like that kind of stuff mostly. Yeah.
Cool. Because I know there's different types of math, and they're very different from one another. So I usually ask what type of math because sometimes
Right, yeah.
it's a different interest in that area.
Basically, I like anything except like statistics. So if it's like
Who likes statistics though?
Yeah.
Oh wait, except for me. Yeah. I don't know why I like statistics, but I'm more like
Right.
applied statistics. But whereabouts do you live?
I live in Germany.
Nice.
Yeah, like in Eastern Germany.
If we couldn't tell from the accent, it's a German accent, you know.
Yeah, I think so. Although recently someone said that I don't have a strong accent, which was very surprising because I think I do.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what is accent really? But yeah, I would say there's definitely a European accent. If someone doesn't know where to place it, it's definitely something, right?
Yeah, totally.
Do you have any hobbies or interests outside of puzzling?
Yeah, well, actually, it's been mostly puzzling. Like, I usually have like one main hobby that I do like in my free time.
Mm-hmm.
Before puzzling, it was like video games or like, well, actually, I was always more interested in like trying to make video games rather than playing them.
Interesting.
And yeah, so I was always interested in like game design and stuff like that, and now it's just puzzles.
Sort
kind
of
of
sort of
taken
overlapping
over.
in a way, but
Yeah,
yeah.
although game design is a lot harder, I think, than setting puzzles.
Yeah. I mean, it
Or
depends
at
what
least
kind of puzzles you
it's
set,
harder
but
to get into.
yeah, probably harder
Yeah,
to get
that's
into for
true.
sure. Yeah, I think that would be something that people wouldn't realize is that setting puzzles is not actually that hard to get into. That's a good question, Woofers. Did you
Yes.
finish any video games?
No, I didn't. I mostly like I started like when I started university, I started with studying computer science and trying to do like game design. Like it was always back then it was like my dream to become a game designer. But then in university I noticed how much I actually dislike it. Like working in groups in like a professional setting on something that's not for me. Long-term projects are impossible for me. Like I just lose
Yeah,
interest. So
I feel
yeah.
that. Was there a particular like video game that inspired you like, oh, like I wish I could set something like this? Or set. I wish I could create a game like this. Like this is such an awesome game.
Yeah, I mean I was always very into like platformers and stuff, like something like Celeste, I guess is
Yeah.
what I would say. Yeah. Yeah, maybe I'll go with that.
Uh, are you more of a morning person or a night owl?
Definitely a night owl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of both. I had to wake up early for this interview a little bit. It's like 8 a.m. here, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I usually wake up at like 6:15, so it wasn't that abnormal, but he sleeps at 4.
Right.
You actually sleep at like 4 a.m.? That's crazy.
Yeah, I used to. At the moment, it's a bit changed because some things have changed in real life that make me go sleep quite early at the moment. But yeah, usually I slept quite late. I mean, I've had times where I slept at like 8 a.m. like a few years ago.
That's pretty
But
whack.
that's thankfully over now. Like
Yeah, I feel like night owl is sort of a understatement for that. That's more like a vampire or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you have like a party trick, like an unusual talent?
No, I doubt it.
You don't.
I mean, I doubt that setting puzzles counts as a party trick
Yeah.
or that it's like particularly unusual, but yeah.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't pull that out at a party. That would get very awkward very quickly, I think. Uh,
Yeah.
how do you balance the puzzling with the other things in your life?
Do I? I don't know. I mean, I don't have a problem if I have like important things to do, then I don't have a problem to like focus on that for a while.
Right.
But usually I just spend a lot of my, like, just whenever I have free time, I either do something like solving or setting puzzles or just like relaxing, listening to music or whatever. Like that's pretty much all I do in my free
Right.
time.
All right, we're already sort of into the puzzles, so let's go to the puzzles. What was your first puzzle that you ever set?
Yeah, so the first puzzle I ever set is actually the first puzzle I published as well. It's called Infancy. It's a killer Sudoku with like a diagonal, but yeah, it's mostly just like a pure killer. And there's some interesting backstory, I guess, for this. Like I was solving for quite a long time before I started setting. And the reason for that is because I always thought that setting is gonna be like too difficult.
Mhm.
Like, because I assumed it would be like video games where like you can play video games for years, but then if you try to make one, it's like impossible. And you're gonna have to have like 20 attempts until there's something that's like just decent, basically. And I thought it would be the same with puzzles, so I was kind of scared to try setting because I thought that it would be like way too hard, and if I could do it at all, then it would be like me thinking that what I made is good, but then noticing later that it's like absolute trash and having to start over, and I was kind of scared of that.
Right.
But yeah, when I made so at that time I was talking a lot to KNT because I was like solving a lot of his puzzles on LMD, and then he recognized me from like a video game community where I was like kind of active, and he recognized me and he asked me like, "Oh, is that you?" And then we started talking a lot about puzzles, and then he's like, "Yeah, you should try setting. It's not that bad. Like you can do it." And yeah, I mean, I was also mostly solving like non-Sudoku at that time. Like I was rarely solving Sudoku and not that interested in Sudoku overall because I thought it's just a genre like any other. Like,
yeah, which it
and,
is really, but it's taken on a life of its own. Really.
It is. Exactly. Yeah, and then but for my first puzzle, I still made a Sudoku just because I thought it would be easier to start with that. And yeah, then I made Infancy. Like I had the break-in idea while I was in the shower. So like some killer cages, and I knew what would happen like if I place those, and then I just started with that. I think I was also setting it on paper because I didn't know how to use like the setting tools. So
I love how you say like, you thought setting would be too hard, and then you're like, yeah, I set the break in the shower in my head and then did it on paper. Like that sounds so hard.
Yeah, like like I knew that the break-in would work, but then yeah, I didn't really know how to continue, and I thought it would just break and like I thought that even if I could finish the puzzle, that it would just be a bad puzzle in the end, because that's how it has to be, right, for the first one. But yeah, then I just made it and posted it to CTC Discord, and for some reason like people liked it quite a bit. Like I still remember Kodak solving it in the voice chat and liking it a lot, and yeah, it made me very happy and surprised. Yeah, and then that puzzle also got featured on Cracking the Cryptic like a few days later, I think. Don't remember how long the time frame was, but yeah, didn't take very long.
How did it feel?
I think I was lucky with that.
How did it feel to get featured on CTC like a few days after you set your first puzzle?
Yeah, that was incredible. Like I still don't really understand how that happened. Like I said, I think I got kind of lucky in the start because I know that someone was trying to test the puzzle and they couldn't solve it. And then they, for some reason, they, instead of just like asking me, they posted in the Ask Simon and Mark channel on CTC, highlighting like Simon and Mark and asking them like to feature this puzzle so they can learn how to solve it or something like that.
I always question that's never when they say that someone who couldn't solve it recommended it. Like, why? Why? That sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah, and when I like saw that highlight, I just thought, wow, that's never gonna happen. Like, but I found it amusing, but then they actually did. So
Yeah.
yeah. And then after that, like Simon kind of was like really into doing my puzzles. And I think the first, I don't know exactly how many, I think it's like at least 6 or 7 puzzles that I made that were like 9x9 Sudokus got featured on Cracking the Cryptic. And we were like, I was like joking with my friends about like this feature streak. And yeah, I mean, I still can't really believe that all of that happened. Yeah, it's just crazy.
That is crazy. I remembered while you were talking about that I had missed like 2 things to do while in the beginning parts. The first thing, and I'm sorry for interrupting this discussion, but the first thing is the update on the votes. So we have some updated votes here. You can take a look at this later. I'm not going to read all of them out. But Ranks and FJam and I can't remember if FJam was in last time. I think it was actually. Ranks and Doomdiet are now in the pool of people who are actually going to be interviewed for sure. And then the other major update is that with new votes, so if you donate or subscribe to Patreon or upgrade your Patreon, then you can vote for the same candidate that you've already voted for. So this is, I'll post this later in a written post, but if you want to vote multiple votes for the same candidate, you can now, but only with new votes. So that will probably get a few people in. Anyways, coming back to
Nice.
our discussion and also highlighting these wonderful Patreon and supporters, which I forgot to highlight during the beginning. Thank you, everyone. We'll continue discussing puzzles.
Right.
All right. Maybe we'll go to a viewer question to. Let's go to someone who's been very supportive. Wisteria. What do you find most similar between Sudoku and other pencil puzzle genres? That sort of ties in with your discussion of Sudoku before.
Yeah, right. Which is kind of funny because, like I said, like back then when I started setting, I thought that I would just set like a few Sudokus to get started and then like just set pencil puzzles pretty much exclusively. But now I set like 50-50 Sudoku and pencil puzzles, so it just kind of happened like that. But yeah, like what's most similar and different? I mean, obviously the similarities are like, I mean, it's a lot of pencil puzzles, especially like the ones that involve placing numbers, like they have often like similar techniques, right? For the solving process. Like, I mean, and I guess the fact that you always try to have like the most interesting logical path possible, I suppose. But like what I find different about Sudoku and other pencil puzzles, like Sudoku has a very specific, like variant Sudoku has a very specific type of flow, I guess, that people often go for.
Mm-hmm.
There's like this mindset of like what a good Sudoku is like, which is I think mostly based on like the famous puzzles that got featured on Cracking the Cryptic, and
right.
It feels like a lot of people just try to make puzzles that are like that specifically. And I guess that's not really a thing with pencil puzzles so much.
No,
there's definitely
not
more
really.
variety when it comes to that. Yeah.
So how would you describe that style that is encouraged, I guess?
So, I mean, yeah, I guess the encourage style, at least when it comes to like harder difficulty puzzles, which is usually like what I said, like in the 4-star range, it's like you need to have some kind of break in. It's like a bit of a difficulty spike, like something that makes you go, wow, that's crazy, or wow, that's so cool, right?
Yeah.
Like to start,
wow, I can't
to
solve
start
this,
off the
but
puzzle.
I guess I'm gonna submit it to Simon and Mark. Sort of thing.
Yeah, and then after the break-in, you want it to be like as smooth as possible and have like the clean telegraphing, like always knowing where the next step is gonna be.
Right.
But also not making it trivial to resolve, obviously. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty much it. Like that's the structure of most like good Sudoku puzzles.
And if you can use no givens and rules so that you don't have to put anything on the grid, that would be also like ideal for that. So
yeah, although I feel like the part of like putting nothing in the grid, that's more of a gimmick thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that's what most people go for when setting. But definitely minimally clued puzzles. Yeah. But that's also something I like a lot. So
yeah,
I mean, a lot of my puzzles definitely
to pencil puzzles in a way. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and also, I mean, I certainly like most of my puzzles follow these tropes. Also, like also the grid that's as symmetrical as possible for Sudoku. Yeah, but yeah, that all of that definitely also applies to pencil puzzles in some ways. So I guess I didn't really answer Risty's question properly, but
no, it's fine.
I just think that there's pencil puzzles that are very different from Sudoku in how they are solved, especially puzzles that have like no number placement involved, like pure shading or pure loop puzzles or something like that.
Right.
I feel like the tolerance for like look ahead steps, for example, is different in different genres. And kind of like the types of deductions you can have in those genres, I suppose. Yeah.
Blackie had asked an interesting question in chat, which I think is a little bit amusing because I don't think Sudoku is your favorite thing to set. But they said, what's your favorite thing to set outside of Sudoku?
That would be like in general, like
yeah. I mean,
I really like settings. I really like setting Sudoku. It would be kind of, I mean, most puzzles I've set are Sudoku if you compare to other genres, because even though it's like 50-50 Sudoku and non-Sudoku, then the non-Sudoku is like a lot of different things. So technically Sudoku is like the majority, but yeah, I would say like Japanese sums, like the classic Japanese sum where no digits go into the shaded cells. That's probably my favorite genre to set. And the reason for that is that I just, first of all, like it has all the things I like about Sudoku, or the things I like most about Sudoku in it, and gets rid of some other stuff that make it like less restrictive.
Right.
Like for example, for Sudoku, I mean, I like a lot of killer Sudoku or like anything involving sums, right? And you just have that naturally in Japanese sums puzzles. But then the thing I like more about Japanese sums and Sudoku is that it's because you have empty cells without digits, and because you don't have like regions or anything, it makes it a lot less. First of all, it breaks. It's much harder to break the puzzle while setting than a Sudoku, as long as you like find all the steps while setting it, right? Like you put some clues down, you have to be sure that you actually find all the logic that is forced from those clues and not miss anything, because then it's gonna break, of course, if you miss it. But yeah, for me, it's like much harder to break. And then Sudoku often has this problem where at some point it just becomes like a kind of boring classic.
Yeah.
Like once you have a lot of stuff in the grid, and then, or you have to place like some clues that don't do anything interesting but just resolve some deadly patterns or whatever. And with Japanese sums, it's much easier to have like a structured solve path from the beginning until the end. And even resolving the last like 20 digits can be interesting. I think that's why I prefer it for setting.
Yeah, I mean, you have to try really hard to make the latter half of a Sudoku interesting.
Yeah, I feel like it sometimes happens, like there are ways to do it, but I don't think all of my puzzles, like only a few of my puzzles, I think, have interesting second halves in Sudoku.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maze Gator asked, what are Myxo's tipsos for solving Nuri-Mazes?
Okay, yeah, that's a very specific question.
Yeah,
I was thinking about that because I read the question. I don't know if I have any tips. Like my tip is don't try to start with a puzzle that's rated 5 stars on LMD when solving Nuri-Mazes, because like I've made this small series that I still intend to continue of like Nuri-Mazes hybrided with other genres, and that idea came from my Secret Satan puzzle, because the person I received as my Satany said that Nuri-Maze is their favorite genre, and I hadn't actually heard of this genre until that moment. And then I had to set I made the challenge to myself to set like a really hard hybrid puzzle with that genre as the base, and out of that I kind of made this like series of puzzles, and most of them are really hard. And apparently the genre itself is pretty unintuitive for people to get into. But yeah, I think if you want to get into Nuri-Maze, I recommend to start with either like some random Nuri-Maze from Puzzlink, or you can try my standard Nuri-Maze that I have on LMD. It should teach like all the basic tricks that are required to solve like harder puzzles.
Well, there you go, Niverio. You have some guide now.
Yeah, Nif is also right. Like avoiding Nuri-Mazes also helps if you want to keep your sanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we should bring up one of your Nuri-Maze puzzles so that we have context, actually. That's a good...
Yeah. I have the latest one on LMD, the Build Your Nuri-Maze number 3. Still has only 5 solves after more than 2 weeks. And I think that's the first time that I have a puzzle that probably like currently looks like it will never get rated. And yeah, it's likely my hardest.
Yeah, I didn't bring up that one.
You brought up the...
on purpose, because that would probably be confusing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Right. But yeah, I think Nuri-Maze is a very cool genre, and it has a lot of potential for interesting hybrids. Like I'm just scratching the surface of what's possible with this. But
well, there we go.
It has a lot of rules that aren't immediately intuitive for everyone. So,
I love how you keep saying everyone, like there are people who it would be intuitive for, but they're hiding, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for everyone.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, for me, they were like kind of intuitive, I suppose, but yeah.
So maybe let's talk about the most recent puzzle that you set, the Nuri-Maze that you say no one's gonna solve. How did you go about setting that? Like, where was the inspiration for it? Just so we get a little bit of
Yeah.
idea of how you go about setting these things.
Yeah, so that one's a bit of an odd one out, like compared to how I usually set. But yeah, I can go into that because it's kind of interesting. Like I said, I was setting that puzzle for Secret Satan. And so while I was setting that, I had different ideas for hybrids with Nuri-Maze. Like the first thing I tried was combining Nuri-Maze with Uban, simply because Uban is like a genre I'm very comfortable setting hard puzzles in. And I thought if I just make a hybrid of those two, then I will have like an easy enough time to finish the puzzle for the deadline. Which then that Uban turned out kind of annoying, because I had to make the grid quite big and then the scanning was just awful. So I dropped that idea. Then I tried other things. Like I think second thing I tried was combining Nuri-Maze with Pentominos in some ways, which turned out also really annoying to set. And then I only had like 1 week left for the deadline, and had basically nothing I liked. So what I did was set like a huge puzzle where it's like a giant Nuri-Maze and each quadrant had like a different hybrid rule set. And that puzzle turned out incredibly rushed. So that's why I'm now making this series where I like take each individual hybrid idea and make like an own puzzle out of it. And so for the number 3, like the Crossing Slitherlink one, that's based on the hardest section of my Secret Satan. And essentially, like when I thought of using the Crossing Slitherlink for the region division, I set the whole part for the Secret Satan in like a day. But I came up with, or I found some very interesting like theoretical properties about this this combination, and they are not executed in a very clean way in the Satan puzzle. But here I really tried to force the solver to use those, or like to discover those properties about this rule set for solving this puzzle. And that's why this puzzle turned out incredibly difficult, because you essentially like you either have to bifurcate it really hard, which I tried to make as hard as possible so nobody thinks that's the intended path, or you like play around with this genre and try to discover the logic, because I think once you get it, it's like really fascinating. But yeah, it's a bit difficult to get there. So
right.
That's why I think this puzzle is probably the hardest one I've published, just because of that whole thinking you have to do in the start.
Naverio asked an interesting question. How is playing around different than bifurcating?
Playing around you could do in a grid, like you don't even have to use this grid, you could do it in any grid. Like just try to, what I mean is just like draw some Crossing Slitherlink into a grid and try to color the regions and then see like what happens. Like I think that would help to get some of the right ideas for this one. Like it's just restricted in certain ways that once you understand how it works, it's very logical and you can use it to solve the puzzle, but it's kind of like unintuitive, I suppose, like to
would you say that the example would help the intuition of the solver, I guess?
No. I mean, maybe. But so like I don't want to give it away. But like the main idea of the main puzzle, like it's not possible to have it in a 6x6 example.
Right. Okay.
I mostly made the 6x6 example because people kept getting confused about the rules. So I just like made a puzzle that solves really easily. At least you can look at it and see how the clues are supposed to work.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to put
But
a
yeah,
link to an empty grid as well so that they can spend some time playing around.
Yeah, I mean, you can also use the actual grid. It's probably a better idea, but I don't think it's bifurcating to figure out some theory like about a genre. That's very different from bifurcating. It's like the opposite. But it definitely feels more like doing some kind of like math proof than solving a puzzle. But I like these kind of theoretical break-ins. I know a lot of people dislike this kind of thing, but I'm a fan. Yeah.
So that sounds like a pretty unique style of setting. Would you say there's any setters that are similar to that style so that we can get an idea of what you mean by like theoretical math proof break-ins?
Yeah, I mean, there's some Filuta puzzles that do this. Actually, yeah, Filuta is probably the main sort of like setter who does these kind of things. And there's some specific Filuta puzzles, like Castle in the Sky is the first one that comes to mind. Where, by the way, more people should solve that puzzle, because I would really love that to get a rating someday on LMD. It's, in my opinion, it's like, I always call it the hardest puzzle on LMD that I've solved, which is probably not technically true, because there's like puzzles where you just have to like bifurcate really hard, where that's like actually the only way to solve it. That's like technically harder, but would be less cool to mention a puzzle like that. But yeah. So like the thing about Castle in the Sky is that you basically need to do like, for me, it was like a couple of hours of thinking before you can actually start drawing in the loop into this puzzle. So, yeah.
Looks like you might need to spend half of that time understanding what's happening in the rules.
Yeah, that is also true. But yeah, it's this kind of puzzle where you do a lot of thinking, and then you do more thinking, and then at some point you understand it, and then your mind is just completely blown. Because it really looks absolutely impossible until you get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think Playmaker makes a decent point where he says, well, there's two parts, but then the last part, 5-star, if you fill the entire answer in. Like, if a puzzle is still hard when the answer is already filled in, to figure out why that's the answer, I think that's sort of what you're talking about. Like, you don't understand what the heck is going on, even if you got the answer in the grid. So,
yeah. But yeah, I definitely. I mean, there's also this kind of puzzle exists in Sudoku. Like, I mean, there's some CTC features where Simon just thinks for like half an hour to find a break-in, right? And a lot of them are this kind of thing where you just have like this global thinking that you need, and especially if there's like multiple steps to that, and you can't make any progress before you like reach that certain point. That's like this sort of like puzzle where the break-in is more like a math proof. Yeah, and I definitely like this kind of thing. I find it super satisfying to when you're actually able to solve it. And yeah, I see people in the chat are mentioning my Philomeno 77, which is probably my cleanest idea like this, where you have to sort of like figure out some properties and then start actually solving the puzzle. And this puzzle has also been featured on Cracking the Cryptic, which was an incredible feature to watch, like probably my favorite CTC feature. because watching Simon figure out in like only half an hour, which I think is really fast, how to solve this puzzle is, that was incredible to see.
Yeah, I think related to this puzzle, Chameleon had asked this question: how do you come up with your ideas for new rule sets? Are they just inspired by other puzzles, or do you wake up in the morning and think, what if I cover the phenomenal grid into little pillars and restrict the number of phenomenos?
Well, okay, so I mean, I definitely don't wake up and think of covering a phenomenon with little killers and restricting the number of monominos specifically. I sometimes have cursed rule set ideas just randomly, but this is not one of them. Like, this puzzle's origin was that I set some I set a lot of Philomeno puzzles, and usually what I do is like put some constraint that's common for Sudoku and combine it with Philomeno, because I think that's quite fun. Oh wait, I just noticed that I'm not charging the laptop. I should probably...
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I'm still not charging. Oh yeah, because it's not plugged in. Wait.
Genius Setter's laptop dies because it wasn't even plugged in.
Yes, okay. I am charging it now. Okay.
Excellent.
So what I did is combining like random Sudoku constraints with Philomeno and seeing what happens. And then at some point it became kind of a meme that I would always use constraints that Belsita doesn't like and put them on a Philomeno. And so because I know that Bels really hates Little Killer, I wanted to make a Little Killer Philomeno dedicated to her. And also Niverio, because he also hates Little Killer. So it was kind of like dedicated to both of them.
Right, of course.
But yes, I played around with Little Killer Philomeno, and I've made like a puzzle that wasn't particularly interesting. And then I thought, well, these like really hard Little Killer Sudokus where you have to use like a sort of like set idea on all the little killers together. Like you color like areas that are covered by certain little killers and then like compare the sums or something. And I was thinking, like, can I do this in a Philomeno? Because that seemed cool. But then if you think about it, like if you have like some really big little killers, some really small little killers, and try to cancel out the overlap, what you're left with is you have to like maximize an area and minimize another area. But maximizing in Philomeno is very boring because you just put like a huge region and that's it. And it can cover like all the cells because it's like one region of 7, where I got rid of the whole little killer thing and just said that certain cells sum to 77 and that's it. But if I say more, I would give away some of the logic in this. So
yeah, it's interesting.
I'd rather not.
I never thought about the fact that it's very boring to maximize Philomenos. But yeah, if you went the other way, then and you made the total so high that you just have to fill the entire grid with the same number, that would be incredibly boring.
Yeah, exactly. But minimizing is very interesting and not trivial at all. Right. Because you can't like you can't fill the grid with just ones because they can't touch, and even just 1s and 2s won't work. And so you need to use at least some 3s, and then like you can think about it, but like the way to actually minimize is not the way you'd necessarily expect, I think.
Right.
That's what makes it so interesting for me to experiment with this. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Isaiah asks, what is the most cursed rule set you've ever thought of? While we're on the topic.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that question. I think, I've had a lot of curse ideas that I would even try to implement, but I once had this idea of having a hybrid of a Japanese sum and a crossword puzzle, where you have like the grid, the Japanese sum grid is divided into 2x2 squares, and in each 2x2 square you sum up all the digits in there and you get like a number between 1 and 26 corresponding to a letter, and then you'd have like some kind of like crossword grid where that letter, like, yeah, that's like half the size of the arrow grid, and then you have like the letters corresponding to the sums. It's awful. Like, it's actually a terrible idea, but
did you try to set that, or is it just like a joke idea?
No, I tried to make like a grid. I made like a 5x5 grid that just had 5 words written in it from left to right, and then try to make like a JSON 10x10 grid, like just fill in a grid that would work for this setup, just to try out like how restricted this would be to set.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I had that, and I found a grid that worked, and it was very hard to find. And then I tried to just use that grid. Like, I wrote down all the Japanese sum clues for that grid and tried to just solve it, knowing that it has to lead to like 5 words that are like actual English words, and the whole thing solved uniquely because of how restricted this rule set is. So yeah, technically I've made a puzzle, but that puzzle will never see the light of day.
Right.
It was not fun to solve. And it involved giant chains of, if I make this a 9, then I get a word with like a W and an X followed after each other, which can't be a word that's in the dictionary or something like that. So yeah, not a good idea. I don't recommend stealing this idea for a puzzle.
And I'm assuming that all the words were relatively common instead of just like Wixenaka or something like ridiculous.
Oh yeah, they were, but while solving the puzzle, you would have to make sure that you can't like miss a word. So it's bad. Yeah.
Speaking of weird combinations of letters, Playmaker asked, what's the actual origin of your name, Myxo?
Right, so it was like I wanted to name myself after a Radiohead song because I was like a really big fan. I mean, I still am, but like not that much as like some years ago. And so I just like went through all their songs. Like I made like a tier list for myself, and then went like from the top until I found one that's like a good username. Or that kind of sounds like a username. I ended up with myxomatosis. And the funny thing is I didn't even know what that word means, that it's like a disease for rabbits. And like that it's like really terrible. I didn't know what the word means. I just named myself that. And then it was like in a different community, like people were complaining that they Google my name and then they get like terrible images of bunnies. And so I shortened the name. So it's not so scary.
That's kind of hilarious.
Like, yeah. But yeah, I think Myxo is like a decent name. Like,
yeah. I always thought it was Myxo.
Right, yeah.
I don't know why. I just read it like that, and I didn't even think about any other way you'd pronounce it. But then, of course, I asked you,
Yeah.
and you said it was Myxo.
Yeah.
So you said something earlier with the crossing Slither link Nuri-Maze that you made sure they couldn't bifurcate it. So when you're testing a puzzle, are you looking for like bypasses or like bifurcations, or do you not care if there are like other ways to solve the puzzle other than your intended way?
Yeah, it depends. And by the way, I quickly want to mention that Filuta was able to bifurcate the crossing Slither link. So just saying like it didn't. But I think that means that his ability to like do look aheads is just insanely good, or like to visualize things, because I tried to bifurcate that puzzle myself and I couldn't. So, yeah, but okay, like back to the actual question, like I think most of my puzzles, yeah, I try to make sure that the intended path is pretty much forced. For Sudokus, that's very hard to do. Like I feel like almost any Sudoku, you can just see things in different ways, and like when you're setting variant Sudoku, you always have this, or like once it gets like to the mid or end solve, there's almost always some kind of bypass, right? Because you can just like find some crazy Sudoku step that reduces some pencil marks and then gets you something in a weird way. But
yeah, also with like nine options per cell, it's really hard to check everything. So then, like if they bifurcate one option and it happens to break really quickly, then they could get past like so much just on like a 9 factorial possibilities of bifurcation. It's impossible to check everything. So
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think some other of my, like I think my Philomenos are pretty like bifurcation proof, for example, because it's a lot more local of a genre than Sudoku. Like one cell on one side of the grid doesn't affect the other side of the grid in a Philomeno, unless you have like a giant region. But yeah, like most of the time they don't. So it's easier to avoid bypasses, I think, in Philomeno.
Would you say that's like a big benefit to Philomeno versus Sudoku?
Yes, I think Philomeno is similar to Japanese sum in that way, that it's also harder to break while setting, unless you're setting like something weirdly global, like fill rank Philomeno, then it's the opposite. But generally my advice would be to don't do that. But yeah, like most of the time Philomeno is like really local genre, so it's like a lot of pencil puzzle genres where it's like pretty relaxing to set.
Right.
Although it can also be annoying to resolve. Like if you're limiting yourself to only using a certain clue type or something, and then you can get into situations where something is just not resolvable at all because it's too unrestricted. But yeah.
So let's talk about the full rank, because Powerful, I did have a question about that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, wait, before we get to that, I wanted to mention one thing. Like I've recently set an easier Sudoku puzzle, which is called Schkeuditz or Kreuz. It's like my second last puzzle on LMD. That is just like an X-sums puzzle. And that one has like at least 3 completely different ways to break in. And then after that, the break-in, the Sudoku just kind of solves. But there's 3 like very different ways to solve this puzzle. So I have puzzles where, like, I wouldn't call any of them bypasses because they're just alternate paths. And yeah, when I said this, I found 2 of those, and I thought they were both cool. So I just kept it like that. And then I watched some test solves of this and discovered the 3rd way. And yeah, I definitely think like people shouldn't be afraid, especially when there's like easier puzzles. Shouldn't be afraid of like non-linear approaches. Like it's not a bad thing if there's multiple ways to solve something. It's just bad if like one of the ways is like really boring and you don't want people to find that, then that could be kind of annoying.
Right.
And also in this puzzle, like it happens that the ways are also pretty different in the difficulty. Like one of the ways is like a clean 2-star, I would say, and then the others are like a bit harder. And so I think a lot of people got confused seeing that puzzle with a 2-star rating. But I think that's from those people who found the one specific way to solve that. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Now this one, I don't think has very many ways to break in.
No, no, definitely not. Like this puzzle, like I could probably talk about this puzzle forever, but so first of all, this puzzle also came from the idea to put a constraint that Bells hates on a Philomeno.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my ideas come from this kind of motivation, but I will say that almost everyone hates full rank, so that's not too surprising. But yeah, so I had this idea of combining full rank with Philomeno, and I thought that this would probably be too cursed. And I also saw that someone asked the question, like, if I actually like full rank, and the answer is no. Like, I'm not I'm not a big fan, but yeah, so the idea I've had was just, hey, what happens if I just put a really small clue and a really big clue, like in the corner,
Right.
starting with the same cell, which you can't do in Sudoku, right? I mean, I don't think it's much of a spoiler to point out that that's the interesting thing to look at here. Yeah, so I put those 2 clues down. I figured out like how low and how high can I make them without the puzzle breaking. And then I just played around with it, and I realized that just putting those 2 clues there forces like a huge amount of things in the grid. And then I put like 2 more clues, I think. And with only 4 clues, this puzzle solves like, I think like almost, like you could say like more, like almost halfway you can solve this with 4 clues only, which by the way is a lot harder than the actual path that's in the puzzle. But yeah. And then at that point I was like, wow, this is something miraculous is happening here. Like, why is this solving? Like each clue I add does so much, and also like things I didn't expect. And yeah, then I kept going with it, and eventually it kept breaking at a certain point. Like any clue I add would lead to a broken grid. So what I did is go back far enough and then just try to find a working grid that works with the clues I had logged in at that point.
Right.
And I did like that. This process like took me like 4 or 5 hours of just trying to find a grid. And when I found it, I was like maybe 50% confident that it's actually like a unique solution, because I thought that I exhaustively case checked like every single option at that point. So I'm pretty confident that this puzzle is unique with like only, I think, 6 of the 10 clues. But yeah, it's like not really solvable at that stage. But yeah, then I just added some more clues to like force that grid in a more or less clean way, and that's how this puzzle was made.
Yeah, more or less. Clean way, it's true.
Yeah, but
yeah, the ending is very hard.
I think, yeah, although I think that when you solved it, like you missed something until the very end, and when I was watching the stream, I didn't even notice that you missed that, and then while watching that, I was thinking like, wait, this seems a bit harder than I actually remember the ending being. So yeah, I think there was something going on, but yeah, it's a very hard puzzle, but it's definitely, I would say it's like the favorite puzzle of mine that I've set, just because of, like, I think the logic is interesting all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
It does some very unexpected things at certain stages, and just the fact that it's solved with 10 clues is, yeah, just was really cool for me. So yeah.
So
like in general, I'm a big fan of like very minimally clued super hard puzzles because it feels like so fascinating when you find this much like intricate logic originating from so few clues.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess related to the 4 or 5 hours you spent just at the very end case checking, Dorler, I guess that's how you pronounce the name, Dorler, had asked a question in chat about what was the longest and shortest amount of time you spent to set a puzzle, and how are the thought processes different?
Right, so the longest time, I'm not sure, there were a few, but I think like fill rank Philomeno might be one of the longest, which probably, yeah, I can't even remember for sure like how long I spent on it, but maybe something like 20 hours or so, or 30. I don't think it was much more than that. Like I have a hard time to do projects that need me tons of time because I just lose interest at some point. But yeah, something like that. And by the way, I wish I could do more like crazy puzzles all the time. Like, because for solving, I definitely enjoy these. Like I mostly solve like 5-star puzzles, and it's like the most intricate logic possible, but I don't set them that often because it's just so exhausting to do. But, yeah. And then for the shortest time, like not counting, like just counting like published puzzles I have, it should be like something like 15 minutes or 20 minutes. I have like, I was challenging myself to speed set like some Sudoku back in like around, when was it, like February, March last year, and some of those ended up on LND, slightly tweaked, I think, so technically the time is longer, but yeah, I think something like that. And still, like, I sometimes just set puzzles in an hour or so, and then other times it takes much longer. So yeah.
So how do you go about setting something really, really fast? Are there any techniques?
Well, the first technique is not actually having any time pressure, because like if I participate in speed setting competitions, I make the worst puzzles of all time. Like I see people in chat are joking about my SSC entry from the Skunkworks, which is really terrible. But yeah, I mean, if I, like, the truth is, if I set really fast, I just, like, if it's like Sudoku, I just have some idea for the break-in. Maybe I already have it in my head,
Mm-hmm.
So I already know it's gonna work, and then I just put it in. And most of the time, if I finish really fast, that idea forces a lot. And then it's just a matter of finding like disambiguate or like clues that force the rest of the path, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think for Sudoku endings, I definitely don't mind using like heavy solver assistance to just like play some given digits and see if it's unique, and then just check if that is like a good path or not.
Right.
But yeah, like that exams puzzle, for example, that I mentioned before, the break-in, which basically like the break-in is like all the clues that are in the puzzle except for the given digits, like not to give away too much, but like that forced a lot. And when I found that and was happy with that, I was just like, okay, how can I disambiguate this? And turns out that one given digit was enough. And then it took me like a bit to find like the good place to put the given digit, because there were multiple. I just tested all of them and picked the one that had the cleanest path. And yeah, that's it. But yeah, I generally don't recommend like actually setting puzzles quickly on purpose all the time. Like, I don't think that's necessarily the best thing to do. It's just like, for me, it's kind of fun to make something that quickly because it feels satisfying. I don't lose interest, and yeah. And I post it to testing. If people like it, then why not publish it?
Right. So more on the solving side of things, what makes you like want to solve a puzzle versus not want to solve it?
Well, generally, I think I like to solve a lot of puzzles. I have these, I guess my main motivation for solving things, like I have these quests I make for myself,
Okay.
where I have this thing going on where on LMD I'm trying to solve like all 5-star, not like the first one I did was solving all 5-star non-Sudoku with a rating of at least 97%, which I picked because I just like solving non-Sudoku and I like solving hard puzzles. And then the rating was just so I don't have like a million puzzles like I had to filter or something, right?
Right.
I mean, I don't actually think that a puzzle needs, like a puzzle with a low rating is bad or anything, but I think that most of the time if a puzzle has a really high rating, it's gonna be good. So it's like the other way around, yeah. So I just made that quest for myself to solve all of those puzzles, which includes some really old ones that are like crazy hard or require like weird things, like mystery puzzles where there's no rules given and stuff like that. And yeah, I actually cleared that quest, and now I'm still like, every time a new puzzle pops up in that list, I solve it. And now I extended it to, which I call the 5-star quest deluxe, where I solve 99% and higher 5-star Sudokus. So I'm in the process of clearing those as well. And yeah, like, I guess the best way to get me to solve a puzzle is to make a 5-star, get a high rating, and make it appear in my list on LMD. But yeah, what makes me not want to solve a puzzle? I mean, there's a few constraints I dislike. I think for Sudoku, it's pretty easy to make me like not that interested to solve something. Like, I don't particularly like anti-night, for example, or like certain other global constraints. Like, I think my least favorite thing about Sudoku is like hard scanning. So anything that looks like it's gonna be that, I'm less likely to try out.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do the now I'm worrying that I'm going to mispronounce this. The Wichtel puzzles fit into this? or Wichtel?
Right. Wichtel, yes.
Wichtel.
Yeah, I think people are talking about those in the chat also. Yeah, so like for those who don't know, Wichtel is like an account on LMD that's not actually a single person, but instead it's the sort of like the Secret Santa event, but on LMD. And then each year they post like the puzzles that people submitted for that Secret Santa event, and they post them anonymously on the Wichtel account. And yeah, a lot of those puzzles are very hard, and a lot of those puzzles have very huge grids, because that's just kind of like the meta there. Like they like to gift really hard and really like stuff that takes a long time to solve to each other. And so a lot of those puzzles appeared in my 5-star quest. So naturally I was solving them. And yeah, I mean, there are some puzzles that gave me a lot of trouble in there, I would say. Like I could also talk forever about this. Like there was one puzzle that had like 30 solves on LMD, but was broken because there was a missing Kropki dot and there was a negative constraint. And I took like almost 15 hours trying to solve that puzzle, when my first attempt only took like 3 hours and was actually correct, but I just thought it was broken because of that missing Kropki dot. And then I tried for like 12 more hours to solve it until I just messaged someone who had already solved it and asked them like what's going on with that. And then they still had their solution saved, thankfully. And then we found out that there was just a dot missing. So yeah, that happened. And
that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's just some other puzzles. Like I saw that someone in the Discord asked about that Christmas tree puzzle.
Yeah,
which
post the question.
Yeah, like that puzzle, like I have to add that, like for the people who don't know, like I've been streaming a lot of those puzzles in Skunkworks when I was solving them, and we also group solve them quite often. And there's this Christmas tree Wichtel puzzle, which like the break-in is just, yeah, like I can't spoil it, but it's absolutely nuts. And I tried for like days to find it, and I just couldn't. And then I ended up doing like a giant chain of case checks, because there were, at some point you end up with a thing where you see like certain things are forced, and then there's like 20 options or so. And I just like case checked every single option, and I thought that all of them break. And then like FGEM came in to help and actually found the option that doesn't break. And to this day, I'm still not sure like what's the intended way to like really break into that puzzle. But after that, it becomes like a really smooth, like solid 4-star. Like once you find a break in, it's like it just solves. But yeah, there's puzzles like that in those quests which make it hard.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess speaking about that sort of style of solving, Lego Study asked, do you tend to like puzzles more than the average solver because of your capacity and tolerance for look ahead?
Yeah, so I think I dislike look ahead less than other people do. I guess, yeah, you could definitely say that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I often find myself doing like small look aheads while solving. Like that's just my solving style, I guess.
Right.
And then, yeah, my tolerance is definitely higher, but I think it has gotten a bit more. Like I think 1 year ago when I was streaming in Skunkworks a lot, people always told me like, oh, like you just like bifurcate too much or something. Like I think I do that less now. But the truth is, like, oftentimes I see things in my head, but then when I'm streaming to a voice chat, I just put the stuff in the grid that I'm thinking about to show everyone like what I'm thinking.
Right.
And then it looks like I'm just like writing things in the grid and then saying, oh, this breaks. But actually I was just explaining it. Yeah. But yeah, but it's true that there's a lot of puzzles where others will say, oh, this like was too case checky for me. And I'm like, nah, this was fun. Like case checking can be fun if it's done right, I think. Yeah.
I guess we'll ask the other micro-study question because Playmaker says he's waiting for it, I think. When are you finally getting a new mouse?
Yeah, I got it.
Done. Easy.
So it's been done. Yeah. But yeah, there was this, like, because like I think since some months, like my mouse was broken and it kept like every time I click, it would like triple click or quadruple click. And that would be very funny if I would be streaming like in Sudoku Pad and like using the pen tool.
Right.
And I'm trying to like put a circle into a cell and then it would click 5 times. So it would be like circle crawl. It cycles through until it decides what I end up with, sort of like a roulette situation. Yeah,
Sudoku roulette.
Yeah, it definitely makes solving a lot harder.
More of a focused question. DoomDiat asks, what do you wish more people did more or less of when setting puzzles?
Yeah, that's a bit of a hard question. Like I've been thinking about it and can't really come up with an answer. Like in my opinion, I think that, I guess, yeah, what I could say is like I wish that more people would be brave enough to like do different things. Like, I mean, we were talking about it before about like puzzles where there's like a lot of theory at the start or something. Like if you have an idea for a puzzle like this, just make it, and there's always someone that will enjoy it, or at least in most cases there is. Like there's an audience for almost everything, and you can only make like really great, interesting stuff if you like experiment and sometimes make things that like don't work that well, I suppose. Yeah, and also I wish more people who are active in the CTC community would like try to branch out into non-Sudoku.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's this like first you have to start with solving them. Like you probably can't just go into setting things without having solved a lot, or not a lot, but some of it. But yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting logic to be explored in non-Sudoku, and especially if you're setting like a puzzle with number placement. You can, like, the type of deductions aren't that different. Like there's some overlap and you don't have to like relearn everything you know about setting to do that. So yeah, that would be cool. Although I think there is a good reason why Sudoku is like the main thing that people set and solve. I mean, it makes sense. Like it's well,
because I would say that reason is just cracking the cryptic happened to have success with it.
Yeah, it's definitely because of cracking the cryptic, but like I mean, there's a reason why people like the Sudoku content so much, like compared to other stuff on cracking the cryptic, right? It's just like I mean, there's just a lot you can do with Sudoku. It's relatively accessible, like to understand the rules. Like a lot of people know the rules to Sudoku, and yeah, like just the variety of logic you can use in it is definitely immense. But yeah, I think at the same time people kind of overrate Sudoku a bit, or think like other genres are just sort of like this one-off thing. Like there's so many Sudoku variants, but there's not so many like Sliderlink variants or whatever, like, or even Japanese sums variants, even though like most of the things you can do with Sudoku you can also apply to other genres.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Are there any specific puzzles that you've solved that have had like a massive impact on how you view puzzles in general?
Oh, that's a very hard question. I mean, there's a lot, I think. A lot of puzzles that are really memorable and have like changed my mind about the certain things. Like, I'm trying to think of ones that I haven't already mentioned.
Yeah.
Before. I mean, there was one recently, like I was streaming a puzzle by Wisty, or Wisteria Fall, in Skunkworks. And it was like an kind of old puzzle with like exams and SLs. And the puzzle basically had like some clues in it, and it looked like none of them did absolutely anything. And then the break-in was in a place I didn't expect at all. And then each step was in places I didn't expect there to be any logic there. And I kind of thought like, wow, this was a lot of fun, even though like this puzzle has basically like no telegraphing, or as some was bad telegraphing. But that led me to kind of realize that you don't, like you can make a fun puzzle with bad telegraphing, like on purpose. I mean, why not, right? Because like finding where to look instead of what to look for can be fun if it's like executed well. And I think a lot of people are very scared of that, or like generally see this as a bad thing. But I don't think that you can generalize it that much. Like you can't say this is always bad, this is always good. It always depends on how it's executed. So yeah, I guess that puzzle was kind of cool in that sense for me to see. Then, yeah.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of puzzles I've learned a lot from, but I could never list them all.
Right. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're good at writing your own rules? And if so, are there any tips you can give other setters on writing new or hybrid rule sets in a clear and concise form?
Wait, or do you mean like coming up with rules or actually writing them down?
Writing them,
like
writing them down so they can be understood.
Right. I think I'm okay with it, although a lot of the times there's always someone asking, like if I don't provide like an example on LMD, there's often someone misunderstanding the rules. So I guess it's not always clear, but yeah, I try to order things in a way that makes sense. Like you don't want to be referencing things that are gonna happen later. Like you don't want to write like Sudoku and then write something like all shaded cells have odd digits and then later explain what that you have to shade cells.
Right.
Like that's something I see sometimes that people do. But yeah, it just helps like splitting it up into chunks. And yeah. But I think that a lot of like when you solve puzzles, like it's sort of part of the solving experience to like carefully read the rules and make sure that everything makes sense. And so like in my opinion, being that like specific about rule comprehension is not always needed. Like if something is written in the rules, then the solver is supposed to like read it and not like forget about it or something while solving the puzzle. So I put some of that on the solver, basically. Yeah.
Naverio asked a very loaded question. How do you manage to think of the most cursed rule sets imaginable so that I want to puke in disgust yet create something very fun out of it? So I think the question is more asked in the second part, like, how do you make something fun out of cursed rule sets?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, Nif is a bit of a hater. Like, I don't actually think, but I don't actually think my rule sets are that cursed, with maybe some exceptions. Like, unless I make a puzzle specifically to draw like Belsita or Nif, which, like, as we noticed earlier, is probably happening more often than it really should. But I think I just try to think of, like, first of all, for coming up with rule sets, I don't think I come up with that crazy rule sets. Like, most of my rule sets are as simple as they can be for like doing what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, making something fun out of it. I mean, I just try my best. Like, I don't really know what to specifically say, but I definitely always try to find like the most interesting ideas that I can, like with certain rule set combination, and then just kind of run with it. Yeah, it's kind of a generic answer, but
yeah. Doomdia asked a very specific question. What is your favorite grid type and why is it 6x6 Sudoku X?
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like an in-joke, because we were... I don't even remember how this happened. It was a while ago, but Doomdiet and I think MicroStudy was involved too. Like, we were talking about like 6x6 with diagonals, which, if anyone doesn't know, like a 6x6, like if you put a 9x9 and you put like the diagonal so they just can't repeat, that's in itself not a very restricted rule set. But if you do this in 6x6, there's some, like, it's like extremely forcing, and sometimes it's not comprehensible why it is. But yeah, we discovered like this set pattern in 6x6 Sudoku X, which we call the spark plug, and that's since then been an in-joke. I've made like 5 puzzles that reference this thing. None of them are published, but yeah. So yeah, obviously 6x6 Sudoku X is my favorite grid type because of the spark plug, because it's the only grid where you can actually use this set. So yeah. But yeah, I have a thermal puzzle that uses that set as the break-in, and this thermal puzzle is like completely like ridiculously difficult for a 6x6, and I was thinking recently about publishing it. Like, I did a solve on my own after setting it like a few months ago, and it still took me like 20 minutes to solve. And I was just thinking to myself, how could I ever do something this evil in a 6x6 puzzle? So yeah, that might end up getting published. Yeah.
Well, now that you admitted it's so hard, it might not get many solves.
Nah, I mean, Sudoku always gets like enough solves.
True, yeah. I mean, for some people.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know, like, I feel like Sudoku not getting, like, on LMD, like, usually my threshold is like the 10, like getting a rating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want all my puzzles to have a rating just because I'm weird, I don't know. Like, I know it doesn't really matter, but it's nicer when you have like the red stars on the list. So I feel like for Sudoku, because my Sudokus usually don't have extremely complex rule sets, that means they get rated relatively quickly. Whereas there's definitely some setters who have very like intricate rule sets that can turn people off from even trying to solve.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of some weird rule sets for Sudoku, Playmaker asked about updates on GeoGuess Sudoku, which I don't even know what that means, but
yeah, so that's a thing I'm working on, which I don't know if I'll ever finish, but I've been playing a lot of GeoGuessr. Also in Skunkworks, like it has become kind of a thing to stream like in the evening at some point when we're tired of puzzling. And I was thinking for a while if I can somehow combine GeoGuessr and Sudoku
naturally,
in a puzzle. Yeah, because it just seems like a fun thing. And so I like my idea right now is that I'll have a 9x9 grid where each cell has an image attached to it, and I'll have to like find some way to implement that in software where you can like hover over the cell and see an image, and that image is like all the 81 images are going to be from different countries, and then you have to basically do like a chaos construction where you have like a region that's like African countries, a region that's like South America or whatever, and you build the regions, and then you assign, and then you also find like which country is which, and you can kind of like use the regions to guide you to like not make mistakes or something. But I'm not 100% sure yet on how to actually execute the puzzle, but what I've been doing so far is just going through the street view footage of the 81 countries I picked and trying to find like one easy image to guess the country and one that's like extremely difficult, and it's gonna take me like forever to do that for all of them because it's so much work. But that's like the progress, like I'm working on it, and I will make something out of it eventually. Yeah,
I feel like Kodak's question must be related to this. What experiment would you like to do even though you're terrified of it?
Yeah, I mean, related to puzzles, I would have, like, I think the GeoGuess Sudoku counts. I mean, I am doing it. I'm terrified of the outcome because I'm not even sure if it will be any fun to solve. Because I'm not even completely sure yet how the puzzle is gonna even work. But yeah, I can't really think of something else that would fit as an answer to that question. So
yeah, just have a puzzle hunt, and then every puzzle has different rules based on the country that is identified with the image, and you just have to list 100 rules based on every country that it could possibly be. You know, it's so easy. Perfect.
Right.
GeoGuessr. It's such a weird idea to combine that with Sudoku. But I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
In its own way.
Like the funny thing is that it's technically like not a logic puzzle completely, because like there's no logical way to deduce which country is which. Like you just kind of have to know.
Guess.
Like guess or like have the knowledge about the. I mean, you know, like the GeoGuessr Pro players, they can guess more things pretty easily because they know like all the details, like what to look for specifically. But it doesn't have much to do with like a logic puzzle in the standard sense, like Sudoku or other pencil puzzles that we usually set. So yeah.
Well, anyways, transitioning away from GeoGuessr. David Ratner asked in the chat, besides KNT, who you mentioned earlier, who else has influenced you in your setting career and or helped you where you are now as a setter?
Yeah, I think I mean, it's just all the people I like talk to frequently about puzzles. Like I would say Niverio, Doomdiad, Belsita, MicroStudy, FJam, like the folks that hang around in Skunkworks a lot. I definitely, and I guess I would say the entire like Skunkworks community. Like I feel at home there. I talk to people about puzzles all the time and just sharing ideas. So yeah, that's always the inspiration. And I think that Discord is like the only reason or the main reason why I set so much Sudoku still and also solve so much Sudoku now. It's just really cool to have that community. Yeah.
Very nice.
Also, yeah, for of course, oh yeah, I should mention because I've read it in the chat for people that inspire me, but not necessarily like people I talk to or anything, but just like for inspiration from solving their puzzles. I have to mention like a lot of the old LMD setters, because of course I've been solving a lot of their puzzles because of my 5-star quest, but also before that, like even before I started setting, I was solving like old LMD stuff quite a lot. And I definitely think like E-Bag and 2Ace and Zuxas like are like some of my favorite setters. And I think some people should like be brave enough to check out their puzzles, even though a lot of them like don't have online solving links or whatever, but it's worth it. They make very good stuff.
Yeah. How do you come up with your puzzle names, and what's your best puzzle name?
Yeah, it's like how I come up with them is like different. I mean, definitely always after I made the puzzle is when I come up with the name, and sometimes I just look at it and think like, what thing do I associate the grid aesthetic with? And then oftentimes I make that name German instead of English because it sounds cooler.
Right.
Like I don't super love the German language, but I definitely think that having like the ability to have like really long nouns is like a cool thing. Like it just makes for good puzzle titles. So yeah, I just pick German like combined nouns a lot as the names. There's not that much more thought behind it, really.
Is there any name that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, I think I have a few where they have like sort of a double meaning. Like I like my Fog of War puzzle. I called it Benebelte Nachbarschaft, which you can understand in two ways. Like if you think about it literally, it just means like foggy neighborhood. That's also what the translators are gonna tell you, which fits because it's a fog puzzle with Renbans, right? So the neighborhood is like the consecutive digits or whatever. And then, but if you tell to a German like Benebelte Nachbarschaft, they will understand something differently, which is like your neighborhood, but everyone's like getting drunk. So yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, it doesn't make much sense, but it's funny.
Yeah.
And I have some other titles that I liked, but recently I explained it in voice chat and people were laughing at me, so maybe I shouldn't go into that.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I think the title that people always make fun of is, of course, Suspicious Dwarf. It's like my infamous title. which that puzzle was originally called Sassy Dwarf, but that was too much of a meme. Like, I
Right.
thought that Suspicious Dwarf is bad enough, so I stuck with that. Yeah.
Bad enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty bad, but it's just because, like, little killers and between lines
Right.
and the Amogus meme, like, I mean, yeah, I shouldn't explain it. It's really bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any puzzle genres or variants that you haven't explored yet, but like you really want to in the future, like the normal ones, not like GeoGuessr?
Yeah, definitely. Like, when it comes to non-Sudoku, there's so many genres, and there's so many that I have to explore. Like, I mostly just like, a lot of my puzzles are just Japanese sums or Philomeno or something. Yeah, I mean, like, land measurement is one genre that I quite like, that I would like to experiment with, but now I've done a lot of the Nuri-Mazes, which is kind of similar, so maybe I shouldn't do that in the near future, but yeah. And then for Sudoku, there's also many variants I haven't worked with. Like, I've recently noticed that I never set like puzzles with outside clues very much. So I made an exam Sudoku and a sandwich Sudoku. The sandwich one is not published yet, but will get published soon. And yeah, I think also I want to make more chaos constructions. I've made 2, out of which one is like a 6x6, and that was my second puzzle, so it doesn't really count. And then I've made 1 chaos construction later on, and I just, like, the thing is, I really like solving chaos constructions or like similar types of puzzles, but I hated setting that because it just kept breaking.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the end, I went with like when I finally got it to not break, the irregular Sudoku solved completely, but I couldn't find like a clean way to solve it myself, so I added like 1 extra clue, and then it was still really, really hard, and it turns out I should have just added 1 more clue, because most people have been like on that puzzle because of the irregular at the end. So that didn't go very well, so I just kind of want to learn how to make better chaos constructions. It's like a thing I'm trying to do, but I haven't thought of a good rule set yet to use. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay. Got like 18 minutes left, so let's do some rapid fire questions while we still have some time.
Okay.
So fast as you can, one or the other, or sometimes there's 3 or more options. So, I mean, I say fast as you can, but some people take longer, so feel free to take your time if you want, but you will be made fun of. Okay, high loadity or odd evenity?
High loadity.
Local or global deductions?
Global.
Coloring or good living?
Coloring.
Simple or complex?
Complex.
Favorite digit to dance to?
7.
Geometry or arithmetic?
Both.
Okay. Penpa, F puzzles, Sudoku maker, or something else?
Sudoku maker.
Okay. Sudoku or pencil puzzles?
Pencil puzzles.
Chaos or order?
Chaos.
Big or little?
Big.
Digital or analog?
Digital.
Cages or lines?
Cages.
Arrows or dots?
Dots.
Indexers or chess constraints?
Chess constraints, but both no. please.
To disambiguate a given or an extra rule.
Given.
Outside or inside clues.
Inside.
Shading or region division.
Shading.
Cheese or bread.
Bread.
Good or evil.
Evil.
Lawful or chaotic.
Chaotic.
Okay, expected. All right, that's all the rapid fire questions. Very good job.
All right, nice.
Is there any topic that you wanted to talk about we haven't talked about yet?
Nah, not necessarily. Like, I will probably think of something later when the interview is over. That's how it usually goes.
Yeah. Sleep Sauce asked a question which I haven't worked in yet because I don't understand it. What's your favorite meta type and why is it a bird? Why is it bird? And also, what does this question mean?
Yeah, that's a GeoGuessr question.
Oh, okay.
Like, it means there's like meta and GeoGuessr. Like certain things, like sometimes you see a piece of like the car that the Google car they were driving with, and you know like what country it is based on that.
Right.
And there's like our meme in Skunkworks is the bird meta. There's like that place called Midway Atoll, where there used to be like a bug in the GeoGuessr jewels where you'd get like that same location all the time.
Oh, okay.
Like the exact same location. It's just like a little island in the middle of the ocean, and there's like 1 million birds on that island, and it's the bird meta. Like, you just have to know where it is. Yeah. So yeah, obviously my favorite meta, but sadly they changed the algorithm and now it doesn't appear anymore. So yeah,
Right.
I miss bird meta.
Microstudy's asking me to pull up a picture of the Midway Atoll birds. Midway Atoll birds.
And that's of course the important thing to do.
Oh. Let me bring this up. There you go. Request answered.
Yeah. I mean, they're definitely very cool looking birds. So, and there's a lot of them.
Birds. Look at all those chickens.
Oh yeah, and people are talking about a puzzle. If you also want to see that, I've made a puzzle dedicated to the bird meta. I'll send you the link in Discord.
Sorry, we lost Mixo for a second while I grabbed that. It's loading still. Oh, there we go. Oh, this is hilarious. Fabulous. Yeah. Bird meta.
Yeah. Many would say this is my best creation. But
Epic. I love the little wings.
Yeah, like the puzzle took around 5 minutes to set, but the aesthetic took like an hour, so
right.
It was definitely worth it.
Oh. How would you describe your reputation as a constructor, and do you think that matches your perception of yourself / the reality?
I think like a lot of people think I make like pretty like hard puzzles, and that a lot of them use like cursed rule sets that shouldn't be used together. I think it's like true to a certain extent, but I feel like there's other setters who make like way more cursed stuff than I do in general. So yeah, I don't really think that part super matches, but I understand where people are coming from. Like I definitely do things that are weird, I suppose, quite often. But those are often the things I find interesting to explore. So yeah, and then yeah, and for the difficulty, like I've recently started to make a lot more or more easy puzzles than I've been making before, like in the 2 to 3 star range.
Right.
I used to have this curse that I cannot make a puzzle that's less than 3 stars difficulty. Like I was trying really hard to make a 2-star puzzle and it never worked. Like people always said, oh, this is like much harder than that. Like my Fog of War was, when I said it, I was like, wow, this is finally I've made a 2-star puzzle that I like. And then the testers were like, no, it's just like a solid 4. So yeah, that yeah, but recently I have made some puzzles that are easier and still have like the sort of interesting logic that I try to put. Because yeah, I have this thing like when I make a puzzle, I want to either like if it's a rule set that I haven't seen before for some hybrid or something, then I'm okay with using like just basic like intuitive deductions all the way through, because I feel like it's fresh. But if I set like a Sudoku with a rule set that's already been used a millions of times, I always have this challenge to myself to do something with that rule set or with those constraints that I haven't seen before in this way. Otherwise, I just won't have the motivation to work on a puzzle. Right. So, and usually those things end up being like on the harder side rather than the easier side, just because like, yeah, if it's something unique, like most of the easier or like obvious things have already been done, right? So, and I'm not saying like the stuff I do, it hasn't been done, but I just haven't seen it.
Right.
Like sometimes it turns out that the same thing has already been done. But yeah, I think that's why people have this perception that my puzzles are hard.
I don't know if Playmaker was asking this, but this is an interesting question anyways. What's the next challenge after your 5-star quest is done?
I'm not sure yet. Maybe I'll just lower the... Like, I mean, if I want more quests like these, I can either go down with the difficulty or down with the, like, rating cutoff and just, like, expand the quests. Like, I won't run out of puzzles to solve, that's for sure.
Right.
I kind of want to do some... Like, I know other people do this where they solve, like, from one specific set or they solve, like, all their puzzles. I might try to do that with some setters where I know nobody has done it. Like, for example, Filuta. I know that nobody has completed solving Filuta's full catalog. And since I've already done Filuta's hardest puzzle, and I'm a very big fan of their puzzles in general, I might like go for that after the 5-star quests.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Do you find more enjoyment in solving or setting?
I think they are the same for me. And I think also setting is very similar to solving. Which is like kind of what I mentioned before. Like if you especially if you compare it to like game design or video games, like designing video games is so different from playing them. well as with puzzles, it's like setting puzzles is just kind of like solving puzzles, except you like dive really deep and like you need some creativity to come up with the actual deductions.
Yeah.
But of course, a lot of it is just playing around until you find something cool. So yeah, I think, and then it's just like solving until you get stuck, right? So yeah, I find that really cool about puzzles, how similar solving and setting is, and that you can actually get so much better at each of those by doing the other one.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Yeah.
It's funny how sometimes when you're setting, you end up solving like some kind of meta puzzle of like when could this be unique? Like, I find that very interesting.
Yes, definitely. There's like these kind of puzzles on old LMD. I've seen some of those where it's like a puzzle that has many solutions, but you have to find, like, for example, you have like a puzzle with a cipher,
Mm-hmm.
and there's only one way to pick the cipher such that the puzzle solves uniquely. But if you pick the cipher in other ways, it has like multiple solutions, and you have to find like the one that, like, this kind of thing is also interesting. And probably
that seems either impossibly hard or very cool.
Yeah, it makes the solving process a bit more like a setting
Right.
process, I suppose. Yeah.
And I guess most finally, would you set puzzles even if no one would solve them?
I'm a bit unsure, but I mean, probably yes at this point. But I probably wouldn't have gotten into it if
Right.
that was the case. Yeah. Like, I think I was lucky from the beginning, like from my first puzzle, I just had the good feedback in the CTC Discord. I think it helps that my first puzzle was like almost a pure killer, which is one of the genres that a lot of people like to solve, or at least don't mind solving. And
Right.
so like a lot of people solved it, gave me feedback, and then it just kind of went from there. So yeah. It definitely feels good though to have someone solve puzzles, especially if I can see the solve, like it's either on voice chat or some kind of feature.
Right.
That's always the best experience. Like, that makes it so worth it to set, just for that alone.
Is there any one who you particularly enjoy watching solve your puzzles?
Nah, I won't pick favorites. I mean, I enjoy watching everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's like this anxiety, like, I will say, like, when I watch people solve my puzzles who don't have like their microphone enabled, sometimes it's very scary, because sometimes when they get stuck or something, then I don't know what they are thinking, and then I'm thinking, oh, maybe the puzzle is bad and they hate it or something. But yeah, I mean, I still like watching it. So yeah, definitely love to watch everyone. I mean, of course, it's always nice when my friends solve puzzles in Skunkworks, because it's just like cool to be able to like talk about it. And yeah, like for YouTube features or Twitch, I also don't have any favorites. I think, yeah, I've been enjoying a lot that Zeta has been doing a lot of my puzzles on stream, and also the non-sudokus that don't really get featured anywhere else. That's always great to see solves of those too. Yeah.
What makes you want to, because you do a lot of streaming of puzzles, what makes you want to stream the puzzles rather than just solve them on your own?
I just like the the group solving, like when people are helping in the chat, especially when it's like Sudoku. I don't want to do the hard scanning. Like it's more fun if puzzles have like sticky steps like that. Someone can spot it quicker. Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of fun. I definitely recommend solving in groups. It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also thinking maybe to start like streaming, like on YouTube or Twitch, but I'm not sure if I have the time. Like maybe if I do that, then I will just stream less on Discord, and then maybe I'll miss that.
Right.
So, like, yeah, unsure. And also, I would need permission for every puzzle, which also sounds annoying.
Yeah, true. All right, well,
Yeah.
it's basically 2 hours now. Yeah.
Right, didn't feel that long.
No, I went by fast. It always does. Thank you again, Myxo, for coming in and chatting with us. I really enjoyed it. And thank you again to the people on the screen, Patreon supporters, other supporters. Very much appreciated. Couldn't do this without you. Yeah, Myxo wouldn't be here without you. So, yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
And I told you who was up next, so you can announce that. I didn't forget this time.
Yes. So the next person who's going to be on the series is a fellow Sparkplug enjoyer and a proud member of the KNT family. And they also set pretty good puzzles. Of course, I'm talking about Doom DS. So yeah, really looking forward to that. And I hope you will all join in for that.
Yeah, for sure. I can't wait. Doom DS is great.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
Just a reminder that this is the votes as they are right now. And for new votes, so new donations or Patreon subscriptions or upgrades or whatever, you can vote for the same candidate that you've already voted for. So that's new. And I'll post something in the community page about that and on Discord. So, yeah. Hope everyone has a good... we don't have a date for it, David, yet, but I'll get that scheduled pretty soon here. Yeah. Thank you, Myxo, again, and thank you, everyone, for coming out. Have a good puzzling, everyone.